all procedural hi to you, and today's topic is let's start. Today is an experiment, as I'll try a new format. We'll do the shader from scratch, and you'll see everything that I do to achieve the final look. Since the video got big, I've decided to split it into smaller bits. In this bit, we'll take a look at creating FX textures. We'll start from the Substance Designer. I use it for most of my FX textures. The main reason is it works quite similar to how a fragment shader does. It is due to that you can check your ideas in it without writing a shader first. And that's what I'm going to do here. The key idea is quite simple. We'll use a UE warping method. In Substance Designer there's a node called directional warp, and I'll show you in a second what it does. So I'm going to create a white fill, and as you can see, the intensity defines how far the thing will be moved. There's also the direction where it will be moved, and when we put in a gradient, you see that it distorts. Basically, the whiter it is, the more distorted it gets. This technique is widely used in shaders, especially the stylized effects. And today we're going to do one of them, which is Stylized Fire. I'll start by creating a rough shape of what I think it's going to be. I'm using a polygon node as a start because it gives a good gradient. I can then sample that gradient by a histogram scan. If you don't know what that is, histogram scan allows you to remove all the unnecessary beats and basically just sample towards a certain value. So I'm going to use a big shape and then a smaller one inside of it to create the inner fire and then the outer layer. Histogram scan and polygon are the perfect tools for this job. And now I'm going to show you what happens if I put some noise in it. I'm going to use a fluid noise first because I believe that it gives a good fire impression. You're going to see in a second what I mean. Right now it doesn't look like anything, but there's a rainbow at the end of this pass. Trust me. I'm going to move the shape down a little bit so that it stays at the bottom and gives a better shape of the fire. Also gives some space for the distortion at the top. As you can see, it starts to look like an interesting shape, but it'll look way better once we add some colors to it. I use these shapes as masks, so the final colors won't be like this, but it's nice to see that we have the basic idea down, which is bright yellow, bright red. I've created a transform node so that I can easily preview the final results that I will probably get in the engine. This gives a good impression. It also already shows what I'm trying to achieve. So basically, there are two main ingredients. One is the effects textures of the inner layer and the outer layer, and finally there's the noise that allows us to warp that initial texture into something more fire-like. Stylized themes often use less gradation of colors. It uses pure colors, like 16-bit graphics. Basically, you're very limited in your palette. To make sure that my masks are not on top of one another, I'm going to use a subtract blend. As you can see now, it's pure red and pure green. It's good to note that the texture, any texture, contains of channels. Usually it's RGBA, which stands for red, green, blue, and alpha. So if you want to create masks, it's good to create masks with those colors. And as you can see, we have pure red and pure green, which is a great start. At this point, we basically have everything we need to start. But I want to check one more thing. As you can see, the fire warps practically everywhere the same, and I'd like it to warp more towards the center, so that we have that fiery, wispy shape. And once we multiply that gradient with our noise, we get the effect that I wanted. I'm going to show you what happens if I remove that in a while. I'm going to show you what happens if I remove that. As you can see, the shape gets more streamlined if we add that gradient. Now we can keep it as a texture, or we can use a UV manipulation to duplicate that effect, because that would be another texture and another texture sample if we decide to keep it as a texture. So these are the final textures that I'm going with. I've got a couple of noise textures just to check out some variants. Then I've got my effects texture and also the gradient texture. In the next part, we'll jump straight into Unity to create the shader. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe.